Today we have a art journal tutorial where we are going to layer it up, layers upon layers. I'm Creative Katie, Karen Burchill. Welcome to my channel. So I started with this free domain, common domain printable, and I'm not exactly sure which of the two sites that I got this one from. I printed it out on copy paper with my laser printer and I cut off the background. Now I'm just deciding to put it in this orientation on my 11 by 12 Canson mixed media. The colors that I'm going to use, I'm taking from the focal image. That golden color, I'm using Naples yellow, I'm using orange, alizarin crimson that I'm going to blend into the colors, and I'm going to add turquoise. But before I colorize my background, I wanted to add some interest. I wanted this to look tropical, lush. I was looking at the shapes that were on the focal image. I want to mirror some of that, uh, tropical, lush, tribal. And so I flipped through my stencils and finding that. I'm keeping in mind where I want to be putting my focal image because I just don't want to put something, that's going to jut out. So the first stencil that I used was Dash V. This one is called Winged Mosaic, and I love this little circular motif that's in two of the corners. And I did this in black, and I know some of this is going to be pushed back either by the modeling paste that I'm putting now through the Fantastical stencil. And I chose this Fantastical stencil because the motif that's in it reminded me of the shapes that we see in the wings. So I'm mirroring those shapes. My background, I want it to be lush and full and dense. I'm using the light and fluffy modeling paste here from the Crafter's Workshop, and I'm going to make sure I dry that before I colorize the paper. And you really want to make sure that you allow that time. So I'm mixing Naples yellow with the alizarin crimson with the orange. Now, initially my plan was to add a little bit of that turquoise that's on the focal image, but you'll see what happens. I'm working it with my fingers into the texture paste. Later on, I grab a makeup sponge to get it in a little bit deeper to colorize it. So let's count the layers. We had the stenciling with the black, layer 1, modeling paste is layer 2, the color is layer 3, and there's many more to come. I don't know that I knew when to stop with this. I was just having fun creating pattern and texture on my page. The Naples yellow is, as well as the turquoise, are more opaque, which means you're going to see less of whatever's behind it. I didn't want the yellow right around the bird. That's why I am putting the bird in place. I wanted a little bit more definition because so much of that bird is yellow. I wanted it to stand out a little bit. So I wanted to make sure that I had other colors other than the yellow in there. Now at this point, I wasn't happy with where the turquoise was. And if that happens, don't fret. Grab some gesso it over, and once everything's dry, you can come in and put the color that you want, and you can totally obliterate the wrong color choice. I just decided that I'm going to add that turquoise in another way with some stenciling. So I was trying to rush the process here and wasn't giving it time to dry, and of course, when you don't give yourself the time, you can make it harder on yourself. So here I'm just colorizing that. And I'm just going with the yellow, the orange, and the alizarin crimson. And blending those colors, which gives a whole lot of other tones of those same colors. So once all that was done, I wanted to add a little bit more of this motif from this Dash V stencil, and I will put a link, the names and a link to these stencils. You can get them at NinnysNapkins. She carries a lot of the TCW products, as well as the TCW Shopify store or Amazon. So do some comparison shopping and do what works for you. Just wanted a little bit more of this up front. Some of it got pushed back a little bit too much, so I'm adding it. So this is now another layer. This is layer 4. And it's a little bit more forward. The first layers are going to be more distant. I like this Dash V stencil because it has, 5 different patterns on it. Now, truth be known, I could have left this stenciling at any point in time. I could have stopped, and I like it in so many stages, but I really layered it up with the stencils. So here I decided I'm taking this little motif that I love off this winged mosaic stencil and stenciling with the turquoise to introduce the turquoise from the bird onto the background. And it's such a bright color, and the contrast, because they're complementary colors, really adds a lot of interest to the page. So I think we're up to layer 5 because some of this is going on top of the black stenciling that we just did. I'm just getting rid of some of the black edges by using my makeup sponge and my black acrylic paint. You could use ink, but I have the acrylic paint out so already and on a makeup sponge, so that's what I prefer doing. So I'm debating which sentiment I want. Now, I decided that I'm going to come in with the Naples yellow and this Jungle Vines stencil, one of my favorites. I just wanted to add more. So what layer are we up? 6? It's like the vines. Remember, my goal here, my thinking was to make this look like a tropical forest with all the layers. So you push back the vines and then there's something else and then there's something else. And then so you have the different textures and shapes. So I'm liking that. And then I decide, I want to make this a little bit brighter. So now I'm doing with the same stencil, I just kind of bumped it, moved it to a different part, and I'm using white. So I think that's layer 7. And here I'm using white acrylic paint. I find my gesso is a little too thin and it bleeds under the stencil here. But you can use white gesso if that's not happening. And I really love this background right now. The colors in the background and everything. And I would totally use this for another project. So I'll have to remember that. Here's where I think I would have liked to have left it. But I didn't. I'm gluing down my focal image with fluid matte medium, and I'm putting a good layer underneath and a good layer on top. Now I've grabbed my angle brush and I'm going to use black acrylic paint and the floating acrylic technique of shading or edging the page, and then I'm going to shade the bird as well, just to make it stand out from the background. If you've watched my channel, you've seen me doing this numerous times. I do have a lesson. You can just search in my channel for floating acrylic and you will get that shading video, and you can learn how to do this technique. You can also use a Stabilo all pencil or a charcoal to shade and do the exact same thing that I'm doing. It's just charcoal and Stabilo all pencil aren't permanent. Here I'm just adding the shading, making the bird stand out. The branch was cut a little short, so I am just extending it to fit my composition. Easy peasy. Even I can draw a stick. I come back and I shade, I add a little bit, and then I come back and I may add a little bit more in some areas. Start light and build it up. It's easier to add than it is to try to take it away. The nice thing about using the common domain, free domain pictures is you can size them up, you can print out more than one. So if you're unsure what kind of background, you want to try it one way, you can try it another way, you can experiment, and you have multiple images of the same thing. Now here I decided to take black acrylic paint on my blending foam and bring out that texture. I had put the texture paste on there and you really couldn't see it, so I brought it out with the black. And that changed the entire feel of this page. I did come in and I put gold on here, but then I went back to the black. I didn't like the gold. I wanted the contrast that the black gave us. Now that everything, all the layers are down and I lost count, I think we were at 8 or 9 layers, I'm putting the sentiment, and I had printed this out and I chose this font because it reminded me of the book Where the Wild Things Are that I used to read in my former life as a teacher. Using my black Posca pen and just outlining the sentiment just to make it stand out a little bit more, give it a little bit of definition. Then using the Posca pen just to add a little bit of line work. I go around the page and then I add some line work on the bird itself. So I asked the question, can you have too many layers? In some respects, this got very busy, but in another respect, that's what I wanted. I wanted it to be so very lush, like a tropical forest. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the subscribe button. Follow me on Instagram at Creative Katie. And until next time, go get creative.